13, Thinking Out Loudest, Lecture 4.1, World Building in Virtual and Augmented Reality. My father repeated to me a mantra that was becoming popular in the 1970s as America recovered from the trauma of the Vietnam War and the ambiguous promise of the 1960s Cultural Revolution. He said, "The job for you hasn't been invented yet." What kind of a job can you imagineer for yourself that might meet sustainability goals and take advantage of traditional and new techniques and technologies? How might you be able to sell yourself and use your skills as a 21st century problem solver in the sustainability space? Well, when something hasn't been invented yet, you have to use your imagination. And to do that best, we humans invented a fantastic survival strategy that made us the most inventive, successful species on Earth. Play. Some things seem so obvious once you see them. They become even more obvious once you've tried doing them yourself. It's a case of monkey see, monkey do. It's why all mammals play, why we all play our way to the acquisition of survival skills, why we associate childhood with play running and play fighting and mimicry. From hide and go seek to football to theater, play is practice. A recent article on Play in Psychology Today by Peter Gray titled "The Play Theory of Hunter-Gatherer Egalitarianism" claimed that play is even essential for the construction of political systems that foster social justice and serves a vital role in disrupting patterns of dominance. We have to observe others doing things and then play at them ourselves to get any good at them. But it's hard to make up your own games, and even harder to invent an entirely new behavior or tool. Until the first monkey figures it out for herself, we simply stay stupid, sometimes for centuries. While all higher animals play, and most seem hardwired to understand some of the basic rules that distinguish play from serious survival behaviors, how else, for example, do dogs and cats know how to bite playfully just hard enough to make an impact, but light enough not to break the skin, for example? It isn't until you write down or diagram the rules and moves in a playbook that you can easily spread the ideas through a population and down across generations. And it isn't until you create safe simulations that you can use the magic of play to train a generation in the more dangerous skill set acquisitions. In the last module, we touched on the game-changing nature of YouTube and social media and that revolution. And those of us who use YouTube and other individual and community-empowering worldwide web-based social media to educate ourselves and others know its power. My students and I in the Waste Not Want Not class, for example, learned how to build our recycled aluminum can smelter at Rosebud Continuum and our oven-based HDPE plastic recycler, both used for creating signs at the Eco Science Center from recycled materials using our X-Carve CNC robotic router, from YouTube videos, often from the awesome King of Random. Heck, we even learned how to assemble our router step by step through the kind and detailed instructions that fans and users of this game-changing machine posted for free on YouTube. We learned to use the 3D printer that we have at Patel College and how to recycle plastic into 3D printing filament from YouTube. And I've been teaching people around the world for 10 years how to build biodigesters from local materials using YouTube. Video instruction is far superior to static imagery and text instructions, but taken together, they make learning much easier and more efficient. And yet, two-dimensional imagery, even moving imagery with a good camera person working in all four dimensions of time and space, has severe limitations because of its linearity. Now, those of us who teach and learn using videos are grateful for digital media and the ability to leap forward or scroll backward at whim, a super time saver. When I was using video in the classroom and got my first 3 Video in the Classroom awards from KCET Educational Television in LA in 1989, 1990, and 1991, the big pain in the butt was grabbing the remote control and trying to fast forward and fast reverse to find that specific spot in the video that would help us with the trouble spot we were in our instruction, or to review instructions or sections when things weren't clear. Now, nowadays, we can not only skip around the video in a nonlinear fashion digitally to find precisely what we are looking for, and in YouTube, we can preview where we're going in the video by scrolling through mini windows in the timeline, and we can send one another tagged locations in the video that show the precise images or scene or narrative we want to share so people can find it in a single click. This cataloging and sharing customization makes a non-linear experience possible within an otherwise linear medium that never existed in the history of humanity, even during the age of film and television and video, for 100 years up until the first decade of this millennium. But there are still limitations. You have to hope that the camera person shot the right, relevant objects from appropriately visible angles and with adequate lighting and explanation, and you still have to go with the flow regarding how long the producer of the video chose to linger on the shot of interest. Wouldn't it be better if you, the viewer, could control the action, literally control the shots? This, of course, is what we all dreamed of when the digital era began, and we teachers of the early 1990s were confronted not just with the possibility of connecting to information via the new fandangled World Wide Web, or Internet, but the possibilities of creating augmented lesson plans and curricula using something called hypertext that enabled us to take any vocabulary word or concept or principle and create a clickable link to an outside resource that can enable the student to go deeper down the rabbit hole into the finer points of the word or concept, and even image-based hyperlinks to other pictures and media content. On the early classroom Mac computers, there was a program called HyperCard that enabled teachers and students like me to create a stack of hyperlinked cards so that we could offer self-paced lessons that could be viewed non-linearly. A student or teacher could start anywhere in the lesson, in the stack, and go as deep into the stack of cards forward or backward, jumping cards at will. It was a new way to conceive of textbooks and augmentation and annotated inquiry. What began to emerge from these experiments in non-linear thinking and learning and teaching was the possibility of making lessons not only self-directed when approached alone, but fun when done in a group. Games could be created in the classroom with nobody quite knowing where the lesson was going to go. We began to construct a kind of classroom jazz or improv, ripe with improvisation. In our dreams, we could turn the theater of pedagogy into a comfortable collective performance space in which lessons and textbooks were brought to life. Education would become of the students and teachers, for the students and teachers, by the students and teachers, not the corporations. This philosophy led, a couple of years later, by 1991, to our creation of demo productions, digital engineering for multimedia occupations, which was intimately tied to my science classes using the production studio we created in the vocational area to produce our melodic mnemonic science education through music and video creations. Demo productions sought to truly democratize education by enabling students to augment and annotate the reality of their educational experience through digital and analog contributions of their own. We took our professional cue from meetings I had in 1991 as an award-winning Challenger Fellow with Charlotte Frank, who was the head of McGraw-Hill School Publishing Division. One afternoon in her office in Manhattan, after she and former First Lady Barbara Bush brought me and 6 other Challenger Fellows to Washington to receive awards, Charlotte explained to me that digital technology was poised to change the textbook publishing landscape, and we teachers were needed to think through the transformation, particularly science teachers. I remember enthusiastically agreeing and saying that I saw textbooks more like modern mixtapes. Rather than record albums controlled by the producers or composers, textbooks could become very personalized mashups that would endlessly evolve with the idiosyncratic needs and interests of each student. I may have gone too far with my vision of individually customized textbooks, given the obsession that school districts have with standards. After all, a standardized school experience is the diametric opposite of a customized school experience. But the mashup idea held realistic appeal. Back then, even websites with all their hyperlinks were in their infancy, and blogs didn't yet exist. Educational web content was just appearing, and teachers like myself were excited to encourage students to all get on the same page by letting them browse and dive into very different web pages. The idea was that since each kid had a different level of exposure to or understanding of any given lesson's content, by letting each learner go on their own journey into content, they could augment their understanding and annotate their own educational reality. And as a teacher using video in the classroom, the best I could offer in the pre-YouTube era was to have movie days, where I showed VHS copies of science fiction films and documentaries and told the students to raise their hands and pause the video when they had questions, and then use the World Wide Web to explore things further. Like when we drank a green concoction I prepared from a vegan protein powder called the Ultimate Meal while watching the 1970s sci-fi classic Soylent Green. The premise of that film is that human overpopulation has caused agriculture and fisheries to collapse, and people have to turn to, let us say, unconventional forms of protein to survive. I won't spoil the film for you if you haven't seen it, but suffice it to say that by the time we finished 3 days later, my students wanted to throw up, aghast that they'd been drinking what I had been calling Soylent Green that I'd been serving them during our film fest. The reason we took so long to complete the film is because we watched on the big screen TV I had in the computer room. It was very rare for our inner city schools to have either a big screen TV or an internet-connected computer room in those days. And we were annotating and augmenting the movie every 10 minutes or so by checking on the real statistics about population and environmental degradation and food security on the web. Annotating back then meant note-taking, and augmenting adding notes to an experience. We read books and created annotated bibliographies to personalize the readings, and annotated videographies were a new phenomenon for customizing video viewing. Today, sites like Edpuzzle allow teachers and students to annotate and augment and personalize videos almost effortlessly. We use these websites to bookmark specific locations in the video and pause the video to add quiz questions or comprehension checks and hyperlinks and discussion prompts. Every student can personalize their thinking out loud and louder experiences, just as we traditionally underlined and wrote our own notes in the margins of our books. The technology for that kind of personalization is here. The age of linear consumption of linear narratives controlled by outsiders is effectively over, if you want it, like war.